All right, the time is now 6 o'clock. I'll call tonight's board meeting to order. Roll call has been taken. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you for that. And now we'll move on to item 3, which is to review, revise, and approve tonight's agenda. Are there any changes? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as written? Moved by Trustee Wake, second by Vice Chair Walker Andrews. Any public comment on this agenda item? All those in favor for approving the agenda as written, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. Now we'll move on to item 4, which is public comment. Public comment portion of the meeting is set aside for the public to address the body as a board. It is not time for board response or the public to ask questions. Do not infringe on the right of privacy of others. Please sign in and spell your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The chair or acting chair may interrupt or terminate an individual speaker if statements are out of order. Any public comment tonight?
Not on non-agenda items.
All right, thank you. So now we'll move on to item 5, which are reports and announcements, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hill for announcements from the superintendent.
All right, thank you, and good evening. Just a couple of things to share. Trustee Avgaris told me that baseball has hit its fundraising goal for the coming year, so pretty excited to hear about that, and that means that all things are moving forward there. Our enrollments are going up, which is a good thing and potentially a bad thing, in that we may have to do some leveling to adjust for where our staffing is at. So leveling means that we might be over by a certain number of students in a particular grade level at a particular school, and we'll need to move some students to another school to stay within accreditation standards. So that's always an unfortunate byproduct of having full classes. So we're working on that, but also we're getting some stuff there. In the near future, Tracy's going to be reaching out to set up 3-on-1 meetings with trustees. So we'll do those quarterly trustees probably starting in September. And then we'll have a couple other things being scheduled out, our building tours for the year. So all trustees are always invited to come and attend those. And hopefully if we get it out soon enough, we can get it out on calendar so people can get that taken care of. And then the only other thing is you may be hearing some concerns about urban camping in the parks and how that may have an impact on MCPS. I've been in contact with Mayor Davis. We've had a good conversation about it. And then also the Director of Parks, Donna Gockler. And we're continuing to have some exchanges just in terms of what does that mean for MCPS with regards to bus stops, safe routes to schools, camping in parks and different things like that. So I don't know if trustees are getting anything, but we're going to work on some proactive messaging with their families here tomorrow, and we'll get some messaging out around that. So those are about it for me.
Okay, now we'll move on to item 6, which is new business. And first up is to approve non-resident enrollments for 2024-2025 school year. And back to you, Superintendent Hill.
Yes, so we have 3 students that we're asking to be approved to attend our school district from other resident districts, and we're recommending that they be approved.
And this is an elementary motion, but first up, are there any questions for Superintendent Hill from a trustee? Vice Chair Walker Andrews?
It's a trivial question, but usually students are identified with initials, and I've never seen them with a number. Is this just a new way of doing it, or?
Yeah, because we're trying to de-identify students, and the agreement or the law, I think, states specifically that we're using a number to reference for students.
Any other questions?
Those are state-issued identification numbers.
Seeing none, this is an elementary motion. Is there a motion to approve the enrollment? Moved by Trustee Hayes, second by Trustee Vice Chair Avgaris. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, all elementary trustees in favor of approving the recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. And next, we'll move on to topic 2, which is to approve WGM selections to facilitate an MCPS comprehensive plan for vacant buildings and properties. And this is over to you, Mr. McHugh.
All right, thank you. I apologize, Burley wasn't able to be here tonight, so you get me for a lot of agenda items. The discussion regarding this comprehensive plan for vacant buildings and vacant property really kicked off last year with our facility committee when we talked about the RFQ for services. We issued an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. We received 3 proposals. We recommend the selection here. It's taken quite a bit longer to get to this point, but we're here at this point of selection and approval of the funding for the selection and contracting with WGM. WGM is a local engineering firm. As part of their proposal, they partnered with structural engineers, architect, and additional parties to support the effort. The effort really is, as described, the comprehensive plan for vacant buildings, vacant property that would identify recommendations for potential construction, expansion, renovation, sale, trade, purchase, and/or any other option. The plan is intended to be a community-based public participation plan. So part of the proposal included significant amounts of public participation in development of the plan. So according to the timeline for the scope of work, the data collection and the development of the timelines really would take place in earnest in the spring, in April, with the final presentation of the plan to the board in January of 2026. So as originally designed, we were intended to go to the board in December of 2023 for recommendations, and it's just taken some time to work through the scope and the timeline for the plan that we're asking the board to approve tonight. We'll approve the selection of WGM tonight. Oh, sorry, the funding for the services, which were described at $336,000, would come primarily from rental proceeds from renting the Prescott building. We've preserved close to $300,000 of rental proceed funds, so we would use those funds for the services and then fill in the remaining portion with rental proceeds.
Any trustee questions? Vice Chair F. Garris?
So this plan's end game is to give what our properties and our vacant buildings can, and perhaps a recommendation of should be used for?
That's the idea, yes.
Trustee Mercer?
And so I can't speak to the price, but I assume you guys believe it's a reasonable price. I think the project is something, it's work now that we'll eventually have to do. I think part of my goal is that, and I think there'll be some work from the board, that we can sort these into buckets so that when we do want to do something later, we have done the groundwork to know, like, those are like things we don't need and those are things we're maybe holding. There's also some trade ideas we might want to consider. So this is just us getting ahead of some things, and it is a large amount of money, but I think it's just something we have to do, so.
Can you remind us again who's on the facility committee?
I can take a stab at it. Trustee Mercer, Trustee Witt, I believe, Trustee F. Garris are trustees. I think Trustee Wake was on for a while and may still be on. So that was our trustees, along with myself, Superintendent Hill, and Burley McWilliams. That was our primary folks. And we had some community partners. So we had some folks from the city, from the Economic partnership, and engineer Mike Smith was on the committee.
Who is also a former trustee. That's right. All right, trustee Mercer.
And just to also plug this is, this also encompasses the Sealy stuff, which is a whole other like large area of interest. So it's not just Missoula City stuff.
I have a question too. So it's an elementary motion because of the funding is from Prescott, or why is it elementary motion and not both? Are the buildings primarily elementary?
Yes, all elementary. Yeah.
Any more trustee questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the recommendation from an elementary trustee? Moved by trustee Mercer. Second by trustee Witt. Any final comments?
Can I correct, there are a couple high school properties,
Oh, yeah,
Tool property and the Fort Missoula property.
okay. Sealy. I do have a comment. I do think that facilities is something that we really do need to look at and see what we can do with them, because I do know that I was just at the 6th Street location for MYF, and I really think we could utilize that building in that space to benefit the district better, I guess. So I think this is a really good opportunity, and it is a lot of money, but I think it's something that is well worth it to figure out what we can do with our facility and different things we have. Trustee Afgaris.
I agree with everything that you said there. When we originally, as a committee, were going to go do this, I did not think it was going to be $336,000. That's a lot of money, especially considering everything that's going on in the school district. And honestly, I don't know what kind of value we can get out of $336,000 that they can give us with just a plan. I'm sure there's talking about capabilities of buildings, things like that. I get that. For me, it's just, if it has to be that much, it's the wrong time for that. But that just seems like a ton of money. So I will not be voting for this, but it's a worthwhile and a needed thing, but that's just too much money right now for me.
Trustee Witt.
Yeah, I've kind of struggled with this a little bit because, like Trustee Avgaris is saying, the amount and the timing, but also, like, not only the timing of the money going out, but holy cow, this is going to take a long time to hear anything back, which concerns me a bit too. So I'm still even deciding where to vote.
Trustee Mercer, then Superintendent Hill.
So I support it, I continue to support it. Whether it could wait, I don't know. What the value, I think there's some engineering value. We do have a number of vacant buildings that we're just sitting paying costs on, some of which are becoming, I think Burley would probably argue, a attractive nuisance / hazard, at least one of them. And so I think as a board, we've been unable or unwilling to make those, I don't know, we felt ill-equipped, didn't have the information to decide what to do. And so I guess that's whether we could just charge ahead and do it without this, maybe. I think we'd have to devote some significant time, and there'd have to be some significant district resources, which also take time. I mean, Burley would have to be pulled off other things, but I think he would say he's not probably a structural engineer and would not feel confident making some of those assessments. Whether this year right now is the time, but I think it has to happen at some point. We've just stalled with these things and seemingly been unwilling and unable to act on anything without more information.
Yeah, and I wouldn't try and convince the board one way or the other, but it was our recommendation, and, when we engaged in this process, we weren't really sure what the cost was going to be. But what we asked for in terms of scope of service was pretty significant, especially in the realm of assessing structural, mechanical, HVAC, all the systems that we may need to go get into in order to even put a building back into commission. And I think as I sat through the committee and some of the meetings initially, it seemed like for the first 3 meetings, we kind of spun our wheels on, there's all these different options, but which one's the right one? And I think what we're really trying to engage WGM and their group in doing is helping the board to come up with the ability to make some decisions either now or into the future that could be cost saving for the district, that could prevent the district from suffering further loss. And so, I don't know when the time will ever be right to be able to do this, knowing that we have a funding source that's essentially one time only. It would be nice if we didn't have to spend all of that. And we looked for some ways that we may be able to reduce on it, but we really couldn't come up with that. So that was just kind of to give some context. And I think the other really important part of this is the community involvement in this discussion and what the potential uses and things could be. People who are really skilled at leading these charrettes to bring in the community and to hear that kind of feedback on what should or should not happen. I get letters, emails frequently from members of the community who have an idea about what should or should not happen with our properties. And it's a way to give the board a starting off place on what to do next, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention this earlier when Micah talked about the scope. I should have mentioned the vacant buildings that we're talking about. They do include buildings that have activity in them in the form of tenants. So we're talking 6th Street Admin Building, Cold Springs School, Prescott School, Mount Jumbo School, and Whittier. And then for properties, there's Toole Park, City Swan High School, the property adjacent that Cohen mentioned, Fort Missoula, that's out by the cemetery, Rattlesnake property on the north end of the Hellgate soccer fields, 20 acres up 55th, 5 acres at Linda Vista, and then 13 acres at Duncan Drive. So there's 12 properties that are involved.
Vice Chair Walker Andrews?
Yeah, I had a question about how long we're talking. And so are we talking about, a month, 6 months, a year of study and then planning, which makes the amount of money seem better if it's not, a single month, but sort of how far out is it stretched?
All right, so I have the timeline, and if you've seen engineer timelines, they're smaller print than, exactly, they're like those, only worse. So let me see if I can. All right, so there's 4 phases. So the first phase is define the process and needs that involves sort of this April timeframe through May, and it drifts into phase 2, which is data collection and analysis. And within this time frame, it involves multiple meetings, both with our community engagement and opportunities, along with planning meetings with the committee. That period of time runs really into June, where the stakeholder sessions, sort of the ending stakeholder sessions. Then it goes into phase 3, which is the comprehensive plan development. Comprehensive plan development is sort of the September timeframe into November. And then phase 4 implementation isn't really implementing the plan, but it's presenting the plan really to the board, to the committee, and to other, really the plan adoption. So that period of time is the November through January timeframe.
Trustee Wake, then Trustee F. Vice Chair F.
So you're talking about starting this year or next year?
Next year, April, the springtime.
So is there a way we could break it down and do it so that we're not spending the amount requested here? I don't remember all the numbers, so. And say you did it in the phases that they did, and you only paid for that portion of that particular job. And then you paid it through all 4 jobs, but you're not paying the numbers all at once in one budget year. You're paying it over a different two budget years.
Yeah, we would only pay after performance, so we wouldn't prepay for the service. We would draft the contract to pay following performance.
So you're not really asking us to pay it right now?
No.
You're asking us to pay it
To identify and approve the funding
to
source.
identify the money and earmark it so that it's going to be waiting for us when we need to spend that money next year. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
The challenge is, and this is the challenge we had in that facility committee, and we had a lot of meetings over the years here, is that the school district doesn't have a philosophy on what to do with these. So are these properties assets that we use to trade for other facilities? Do we sell them and take the money and use that money for other things for the school district? Do we use the buildings and invest money and become landlords and get ROI on that? What is our philosophy? I don't know, and if you have and I hate to say trivial amount because dollars and cents, nothing's trivial, but if you have a smaller dollar amount that you can actually come up with a plan of what you could use these things for, that's great. But when you invest this kind of money, in my very humble opinion, we have to have a vision of what the end game is. We have to say, okay, and this is not something, I'm just giving an example here. We're going to build a new middle school, and in order to do that, we need to raise the funds for that, and how we do that is with these. So we need someone to come in and tell us what is the value of these facilities to be able to sell them. But at the end of this exercise, we still don't have a philosophy of what we want to do. We just have what the capabilities of these buildings are. And that's a lot of money just to kind of have a general idea that could take us 5 more years before we actually use that, those capabilities. So it's just, again, it's a lot of money. And I mean, when we're thinking about this budget that we're going to approve here in a few minutes and what $336,000 would do for that budget, or even half of that for the next 2 years, it's just, it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. It's a necessary exercise that the balances in our own individual voting is whether the value's there enough.
Any other comments? Trustee Hayes?
So was there a process to find out, like an RFP going out to ask other engineering groups? There was. And
Yeah.
was there a consideration of possibly using colleges that have structural engineers to do this as a project?
We put it out as an RFQ, so request for qualification, because the services are professional in nature, and so part of the selection process doesn't involve price. So anybody could have submitted, and then the selection would be, and was based upon a scoring rubric tied to your experience. So could an organization like a college? Sure, they could bid. They could have submitted a proposal too. It's a normal or typical process for selecting professionals, including engineers. And they did formulate a team, and as part of their development of the plan, which has taken, this time, part of it does involve, as Micah mentioned, incorporating community engagement along the way. And so part of it is really about the plan and developing the process for the plan, I should say.
Trustee Mercer?
So, one, I guess, if this is going to fail, I might consider asking to table it until we can think about it. But 2, like, if we're not going to do this now, okay, Jumbo is holding fine, I think, as I understand it. The admin building is costing us money and heat, but otherwise is holding fine. My understanding is it's Prescott that is giving Burley real concerns. And so then we might, if you want, the other way to break this down would not be by phases, but by properties. That's the one that to me requires immediate look. And I mean, I'll just touch the rail because that's me. It seems like we should seriously think about scraping it. I love old buildings, but as I understand it, it's not capable of being put back. That's not to say that we sell that property, but right now it's just a hazard that's costing us money. We could just make it a park and have it sit as empty land, which would cost us nothing. And then we can just continue to sit on it. That's the one that to me is the most pressing, as well as thinking about trading something that way. And I don't know if that is a separate little thing. So if we want to think about beating it down into bite-sized chunks, I'm personally just fine sitting on Jumbo and the admin and Cold Springs and whatever. But I think at least one of those, Burley would like us to make a decision on.
Yeah, I think being on the board, I've been on, this is my second term, but I think that we do really need to do something with our properties and especially our facilities. And I know something that we need to look at, see what we could do for our community, especially for our teachers. And if we can have someone look at 6th Street and be like, oh, we can turn these into apartments for your teachers. I think that would be really beneficial for something like that to happen. Or, so I think this is an investment for MCPS, and if we need direction, that's why we have our strategic planning. If we really look at it and we voted on it as a board, that we could look at it and see where direction we really need to focus on. And maybe that's something we need to do with the admin so that we do kind of have a roadway to what we want to do with our facilities, because I think it's an investment for our future, and especially if we're really having a hard time with our teachers finding housing in this atmosphere we're in now, that if we could build something to help that, that would really help with our community. Trustee Mercer.
And just, you're talking about housing, reminded me, actually, the other big one is Sealy, right? Where there is this kind of, there's a community that has a housing shortage. We have chronic, real hard teacher placement up there. There is, as I understood it, the possibility of, we have a lot of land up there. We have room to put in some housing with a kind of community effort that would serve everybody's use of it. So I wonder then, if we are struggling with this price, if we want to go back, and there was a competitive process. I think 3 different groups came in and we evaluated them, whatever. And so I don't like if I have any objection to this particular group, but maybe we want to ask them, well, because I would also say Prescott and Sealy are too, with like, they are the big, I mean, those will both be community. I'm hoping the Sealy people are super supportive of it because it's designed to purely for their community's benefit. But those, maybe just limiting it down to those 2 and seeing, I mean, those are ones we should take action on, I guess, to me. And then the Sealy one is a housing one, is a smaller, I guess, trial run of like, what would housing look like in the admin building? Is it worth it? I will be honest that the philosophy stuff I think is all very well taken. I don't want to give up any land that we regret 10 years from now. I also, though, do question whether we want to take over the business of being residential landlords. I don't think, Pat, you love that idea of, and there's weird relationships, and now we can have other people do it. But part of the admin building was, the only other proposal was unappealing, so we were looking for other things to do, because the thought of renting it for the equivalent of like $40,000 a year just seemed like, what was the point of that, I think was sort of the feel.
Vice Chair F. Garris.
And so Cohen brings up a great point. So Keegan, this was a big thing for him when we were going through our facilities meeting, is the housing thing. At the time, it was really serious. It's lightened up a little bit since the last time we met, but it's still an issue, especially up in Sealy. You know, maybe one thing that we never did, I don't remember as a facilities committee, is report all the stuff back that we talked about and burned the midnight oil talking about. We talked about housing. We talked about, Cohen just talked about, can the admin building turn into a housing thing? Could we trade it with somebody? Could we had people on the facilities committee that were talking about getting grants from the state or the city to do certain things and preserve certain things. So that might be something too that would help, is if those of us that have a better memory than me reported back to this group and discussed all the hours and made it a lot smaller about what we talked about, because we did. We really went through everything. I mean, we own a chunk of land up above Chief Charlo up there where they're building all those apartments, just right up above that. And, you know, we had the discussion, is there a way that whoever's building those apartments just keep on building onto our land, and then we have apartments up there, and do we invest in something like, I mean, these were the wild things that we were talking about. So that might be something that we also would be good for this board to hear, is all the stuff that we talked about, and eventually came to a dead end, and Mike had said, well, let's hire somebody.
Trustee Witt?
Yeah, I would much rather go back to this committee than pay this money at this point. I mean, there are some properties, as Trustee Mercer said, that are more urgent and that I would consider pulling out and saying, like, please evaluate this. And Prescott is definitely the very top of the list because I consider it to be a danger, and I have my own opinions as to what we should do with it. But we're not there. I'd love to discuss housing more, but yeah, I would much rather go back to this committee than report to everybody here where what we've kind of learned, come up with, what our thoughts are, and have the whole board more involved.
No. Trustee Mercer?
So I've moved to table this? Is that the appropriate, or do you want to vote it down? Well, it's my motion though, right? Doesn't that mean something?
And I seconded to move it on.
I would see guidance, but I personally have no objection if we want to wait a little while and think. I mean, we're only doing this in the spring anyway, so I can't imagine time. But I do think if we, and I know we got bit by the superintendent consultant because we ended up, or Tracy ended up doing the work anyways, but the thought of that originally was we were spending that money to avoid just adding work to people that already have full-time jobs. And so that's why sometimes you have to pay extra money, because there's no one that has this level of spare capacity just in their month to go out and do this, let alone the professional qualifications. I guess I'm just saying that if we don't move forward with this, then I think that puts some onus on us to do something in certain places, and at least then order specific engineering. I mean, whatever, if we move forward with Prescott, or considering we need at least, if nothing else, an engineering survey about that. Now, if we want to do the community engagement ourselves, right, that's a lot of work on some of our staff who have other things to do versus outsourcing that. I think that's a call.
I agree. I think this should be tabled because I think we have a lot of questions that we want to get some more feedback on. But I do feel like the money is an investment. So that's my opinion on this, that it's actually going to help us get to where we need to with, like you said, the correct people doing the work they need to do and not have Tracy do everything. So, but I'm happy either way on how we go, and I'll let Superintendent Hill speak.
Yeah, I think if trustees want to table this, there would be a couple of questions that I have. One, if we table it and bring it back, when do we bring it back? I don't know that I can come to this group with a recommendation on anything, right? What do we do with Prescott? I don't have enough information about our facilities and what they're capable of and what it would cost to remodel. Should we sell them? Should we sell and then reinvest into properties where we already exist? Should we look at considering trades for land with the city or the county for future development? Like, I just don't have enough information, and I don't know that a committee can come together and say, we have all the information needed to make a recommendation to the board. That's why I suggested we look outside of ourselves. WGM, one of the reasons why we selected them is because they have extensive planning and experience with the city and developing a comprehensive plan. And that's what I ultimately wanted to equip the board with, is that should the time come in the future where we need to make a decision about what to do, we have something to go from. I agree with you, Jeff, that, we don't have a philosophy, but it's hard to know, is it the chicken or the egg? Like, do you have the philosophy first on or do you need the information in order to create that as a board? And also knowing that our trustees turn over, and so you may be here today, and 2 years from now, when something needs to happen, you're not, and so we're going, you wish, right? That may not have come out exactly how I meant, but the idea that this is an evolving board, and so one of the things that we're charged with is we create the policy and we set the direction and for the district for the future. And I may not be here in a couple of years, and so I'll throw that out there, right? Whatever it is, like we're trying to be good stewards with what we have, the resources that we have. I don't know if the best thing is to sell or to tear down and scrape or what it is. That's why I was looking for those outside experts that could help give some direction and guide. So if it would help the trustees, we could ask WGM to come in and talk a little bit more about the scope and the level of detail that they're going to provide, so that maybe we feel more comfortable with that. So I don't disagree with any of the points brought up about cost or timing or any of those other things. I think it's just I wouldn't be able to have the answers to give the board so that I can make a recommendation.
So it's been a while since I looked at Robert's rules. So we have a motion on the table. We can vote on it and and after that one fail. Or you can amend the motion. You want to do a friendly amendment to the motion?
Yes, I want to do a friendly amendment to my motion to
Couple
ask,
months?
to what?
Couple months? Do you think next September, October, for
So
them to
like
come
into
present? Because I think they should present to us. Or just table it until,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, the only reason I don't want to vote it down is just because it was a proposal for qualification, right? And they're qualified, and that just feels a little disingenuous to say. What we're actually grumpy about is what we want them to do, not whether they're qualified people to do it. But
Friendly amendment to table
Yes.
item for future, whatever. And then we can talk about it at the agenda setting meetings.
yeah, and at the agenda, I guess I would, okay, so that's the motion. Friendly amendment to table until the district feels it has new information. Comment to that motion would be, I do think it'd be interesting what a proposal to look at Prescott would be. Just straight up, Prescott itself, the engineering, plus or minus. The other thing, and my comment about these people, the other reason I think these people were in part chosen is the connection with real estate, because along the lines of what we have, so we have this lot up there, is that worth 10 million or 500,000, right? Like it affects how we think about it. And then when we got to go to the admin building and their offer was like this and the appraisal was like that, I guess I just didn't trust the appraisal that much, and it just didn't feel like we had any sense of like orientation or context, because we're not commercial real estate agents, right? And so, yeah, so okay, my motion is to table it until the administration has more.
Is there a second? Second by trustee Witt. Any public comment on this?
I have a question real quick.
Okay.
Since this was an elementary motion, then I shouldn't vote on tabling, I would assume. Got it.
Yep, and I was just going to get to it. It's an elementary motion, so all elementary trustees in favor of approving the motion, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous of all elementary trustees present. Motioned. All right, so now we'll move on to topic 3, which is to increase facility rental rates, and this is back to you, Mr. McHugh.
All right, thank you. Again, Burley McWilliams isn't able to be here, so the proposal here is to increase the rental rates for outside groups. This is the evening and weekend rentals. For hourly rentals, it's a $5 increase, and you'll see on pages 6 and 7 attached to the agenda the proposed rate increases. One is for youth, the other is for adults. So it's $5 increase across the board for any hourly rates. There are some rates that are tied not to hours but to units. So the first 3 hours, for instance, has a rate. That rate increased by 25 and by $30. So the other piece that Burley wanted to make sure I pointed out was he'll be coming back next year to do a similar rate increase. And just as a reminder for the board, when we talked about, or when we adopted, when we're looking at budgets to adopt, one of the items that we identified to help balance is using rental proceeds from outside groups on the elementary side to offset costs. Specifically, we're talking about picking up some added salary with rental proceeds. The budget request included $90,000 offset. So this increase is in line with that budget item. And then the idea, again, like all of our rental rates, we're trying to cover costs. And when we look at costs, we look at utilities, staffing, custodial supplies, and we know all of these items have gone up, and we're making that adjustment just to reflect costs.
Any questions from trustee? Vice Chair Afgaris.
Pat, we did a pretty significant jump last year, right? I mean, we like doubled last year, is that right?
We doubled last year, yes.
And then this is, you're saying about $5 across the board?
Yep.
And what's Burley thinking for next year?
Another $5.
Another $5.
Yeah.
So what is our commitment to our community for this, though? I mean, at some point, when are we raising our rates? And it's, we are a public facilities. I get rising costs, but a lot of what you spoke about there is fixed costs because we're going to pay those whether we rent this stuff or not. So, I mean, I guess the question I would have, and it's kind of a question that we all should ask ourselves, is what's our commitment to our community? Are the folks that are renting these facilities that are also taxpayers that pay for these facilities? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and when we first looked at that, when we formed a committee years ago, part of it was not having the taxpayers that don't use the facilities also subsidize it by then having our taxes, our funding source, our revenue source, fund evening uses by groups. And so instead, the idea is that the groups that actually use and benefit from using the facilities, and really some of the costs we incur, like the floor gym refinishing, I mean, we do that on a more regular basis just to accommodate. The weekend use involves hiring custodians that aren't typically there, so that there are variable costs. And the utility side is even, the lights are on, but they're not on to that same degree and that type of thing. So we use rental funds to cover costs like volleyball standards. So things wear out faster too. So there's sort of a collection of costs that we look at. We know from some of the budget work that we did that the utilities have gone up like 58%. Even the insurance side. So really, I look at it more as, yes, it's likely taxpayers that use that, but there's also a huge group of taxpayers that don't use it, that if we don't charge some rental, then they're sort of subsidizing the users.
Trustee Mercer.
Just to pass on to Burley maybe for next time, I would be curious if use went up or down, sort of reflecting how this is affecting supply demand.
I can say from an elementary standpoint that there hasn't been any. I mean, we still have lines or waiting lists to use facilities. And really, when you talk about, the facility and operations department does do a sort of a fee study, and they look at other gyms that are rented, and we're right there, if not just a little less.
Trustee Witt.
Just a quick question, I think is pretty easy. Who are our number one renters? Because my thought was that it was largely like Parks and Rec does a lot of it through their own sports and activities. Is that the case, or what's kind of the breakdown of like private citizens versus other governmental entities, et cetera?
Yeah, I wouldn't have the breakdown. It'd be a good question, but I think I would assume the same, YMCA and Parks and Rec. But I know that there are weekend users that are tournament-based and fee-based tournaments. There's not enough gym space for the amount of time that's out there, especially starting now and through the spring. Really the rental, the fee rental or the facility rental happens at 6 o'clock. It's sort of like after the schools have used it and used it for other programming. So it's not like 4 o'clock. It's, I think, kicks off about 6 o'clock. But we can figure out that or provide some more detailed information about users.
Any other trustee questions? Seeing none, this is a full board motion. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation? Moved by trustee Wake, second by trustee Mercer. Any final trustee comments? Any public comment on this item? All trustees in favor for approving the recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. So now we'll move on to the next topic, which is to adopt the 2024-2025 elementary budgets and approve deposit of TIF remittance. And this is back to you, Mr. McHugh.
All right, thank you. So just as background, and I know that most of you know this, the statute that's cited in the agenda 20-9-131, what it compels the board to do is to adopt budgets and set amounts to be raised by levies. And but I wanted to point that out because we talk so much about the general fund. This involves 9 budgeted funds and the levies for those funds. And then the other thing is, as Wallenia mentioned, was that the TIF remittance modification that is also part of this agenda item and relates directly to the budget adoption. I'm going to jump to page 8 because it's the motion, because it's really about the budgets and the levies for those budgets. And just, kind of give some background for these, along with a little more detail, but I don't plan to spend anywhere near the time that's part of the write-up. And so the write-up for the agenda is detailed. It sort of reads like you would see in maybe a budget report, but it's just really an effort to recap where we're at and the components of the budget and levies. So on page 8, you'll see the proposed budget along with the levy amounts. The general fund is listed first. It's the largest of the budgeted funds. It represents 60%. The levies represent 43% of our levies. So it's certainly the fund that warrants the most attention just given its size. And what we're proposing is adopting at max budget. The levy amount is broken down, as we talked about before, into the base and the overbase amount to get to max budget. As Trustee Mercer pointed out last time, there really isn't much to do to change those things. I mean, it's really much a revenue or a math calculation to come up with the revenue. The good news is, despite passing the overbase levy, the base levies went down, so we're seeing a reduction of about $700,000 in levies compared to last year. The transportation fund is next. It's to and from transportation, not athletic transportation. It is 90% funded from, over 90% funded locally by our taxpayers through permissive levies. And it, for the elementary district, this amount represents, what's typical is that the total of the budget is spent primarily for contracted services, again at that 90% threshold. A small amount is for software, and a small amount is for salaries, really administrative salaries that are involved heavily in in supporting transportation in their buildings. The tuition fund has a real strong connection to the general fund because we levy excess special ed costs here, and what we're proposing as part of the general fund adoption is that goes up by $550,000. So that levy amount reflects that increase. The retirement fund, this is unique for school districts, government agencies. There isn't a levy that you adopt. It's a county-wide levy. It's based upon information we share with the county. The expenditure here is really contributions to the retirement systems, the TRS and PRS retirement systems, along with your typical fringe benefits other than work comp and health insurance. So this is based upon non-federally funded staffing and how much of the fringe benefit needs to be levied to support those costs. Adult ed, it's a small amount on the elementary side. Really, in the elementary side, it's about parents and child literacy programs, the staff for those programs, and a portion of the cost to operate the facility that they're in, utilities, maintenance, equipment replacement, that type of thing. But a pretty small amount on the elementary side. This levy also includes a $18,800 levy for the Advanced Opportunity Grant. So that's a positive ability we have to levy a small portion in the adult ed fund. Technology, budget and levy, the levy amount is tied to an approved voted levy, and then the budget is related to that. So the budget's higher than the levy because we reappropriate funds. And really, if you want to dive into the detail of the revenue, this is our budget report. And so this is online. Our draft report is online. You can see it for the elementary and the high school. And it goes through this detail that I'm going over with you right now. So you can look at the budgets that are adopted, the levy amounts, the amount of reserves that we hold in several of these budgets, and then the funding sources that support those budgets. So it's really a good document that'll get signed and filed right along with this budget. The Flex Fund is a never used fund until recently. The amount that we're levying represents the amount for the transformational learning. The state is kicking in a like amount into the Flex Fund, so that's additional funds for transformational learning. This is personalized learning for students. It's a big push through the state. It's great that we have these funds available to use. In addition, on the Flex Fund, we also have a small amount of advanced opportunity funding there that's entirely state funding. It's state funded. So that's how you get to that budget balance. Debt service, this is serving SIDs and then our bonds. And in the elementary, it's about $6 million for our bond service. We're levying quite a bit less because we're able to reappropriate funds, but also we received some TIF funds that we're building that we had asked the board to approve plugging into the budget. That's about $200,000 that gets used to offset the levies this year. So overall, you'll see where our levies in debt service have gone down. And then finally, the building reserve. This is our largest increase in levies other than the general fund and, increase, it's the largest. The amount, non-surprisingly, is tied to our voted levy, $1.5 million. For the safety levy, we also have a $700,000 voter-approved equipment and maintenance levy, and then the permissive levy for major maintenance expenditures. So that's the state approved it. It's $15,000 per district plus $110 per A and B. The state is kicking in more, so we're actually levying less to get to the total amount. And on the elementary side, this year it'll be state contributions $290 plus this $325 from a permissive levy. It's $616,000 for projects that Burley identified in March, including Chief Charlo roof project, It was a roof project. I think it was Chief Charlo. Yeah, and then Chief Charlo also had some wind damage, so there's multiple roof projects at Chief Charlo. So that is the quick and dirty recap of those 9 budgeted funds, those levies. If you jump to, I don't have the page number here, but there's some really good detail on page 11, I want to say. Yeah, so page 11. Yeah, thank you. So the top half of this pancake schedule, it shows what we adopted last year. And last year, if you look under levy increase, we increased our levies 2.8 million. It was a big year in really all of our budgeted funds, transportation, building reserve, our general fund. This year, if you scroll down a little bit, this is for this year, and it's 1.2 million. So we're levying 1.6 million less than we did last year as an increase. The total levy is still gone up by 1.2 million, but it's quite a bit less than last year. And you see the debt service is a reduction, and the general fund is a reduction. So despite the tuition increase, the increase in transportation, and the one we anticipated, which is the building reserve, that was part of the voted levy, we anticipated these other ones as well. The overall increase is 1.2, and so it's offset by those reductions. And then you can see the mill increase, 6.8 mills, and then the $100,000 tax impact at $9. So I think if we go back and look on page, if we'll maybe jump ahead a little bit. Well, actually, no, I'll just leave it at that. That's our, the next slide to maybe jump into is the general fund. So that's a recap of all the budgeted funds. The general fund, we have a lot more detail. We talked about it last time. Really, I don't have anything more to add on the general fund projections here. These are estimated expenditure increases and reductions to help us balance, and we're presenting a balanced budget to the board. And then if you go to the next slide, we can come back to this, but this is just a graph that we update every year, and we'll start updating it again in October, but it shows the budget against the A and B being our student enrollment counts. And so you can just see that dive that we're all very familiar with in our enrollment numbers, and sort of a flat line thereafter. If you jump to the next slide, I think this is also an interesting slide because it shows sort of our general fund increase and the portion that's voted. So, it's really great on this screen because you can see it in color compared to in the budget board attachments. The green shows the increases that are voted against the budgetary increases to the general fund. And you can see that 2022 year where following COVID, we just didn't run a levy and we actually went backwards based upon enrollment decline. And it's just hard to recover from that. And our levies are smaller and our budgetary increases are smaller when we have those enrollment drops. Then the next slide is our mills, and we have both the elementary and the high school here, but it's really something I like to point out. We know our mills are affected by our tax valuation, but they're also affected by what we just saw there, and we'll see more pronounced on the high school is where we levy less, and so we're going to levy less. We'll levy fewer mills. Here, we still are levying about the same mills, kind of a drop, but the debt service is really taking a deep dive, which we expect. We're paying off those bonds, our community is, and so that investment over time is going to look like what we showed from 2012 to 2017, where there's no debt service obligation at all, or very low. So then the next slide, We'll jump back to that one in a bit. Oh, yeah, let's look at it now. High school, it's the same thing. We won't have to look at it later. It's really more pronounced because we've had more levy reduction on the high school side. And we've also had more bonds, other than the ones we issued in 2016 and 2017, that have come off the table over time. So that's part of that drop too. We had refunded some bonds that are dropping off. So it's sort of like when you get to the end of a car loan or a mortgage, those final payments really hammer against your debt, and that's when you had some of these payoffs. So next slide. This is the revenue for the general fund, and it's broken down. The bottom part for the elementary shows the base and over base levies, the fact that we're going down 700 and, I can't read that still, 756,000? 86, thanks, Elena. And then the big reason there is the GTB, guaranteed tax base increase. That's the state picking up more. They kind of were slow at the wheel a little bit because last year our local taxpayers paid out the 95 mills and we got less GTB. It was just a weird tax year. And then near the bottom, you see the tax values, the slight growth in tax value, not surprising. It's a every 3-year look. And then the mills levied going down. And I think that is it on the elementary side. And I can answer questions or jump to the high school, whatever.
Yeah, because there'll be two motions. If you guys prefer him to keep going, or would you like to do the elementary motion and move forward? We could keep going. We'll do
Okay.
them at the end.
All right, sounds good. So then the high school version of the first item I talked to is on page 17. So page 17 of the packet is capturing the high school side. So here we go. Thanks, Tyler. So this is again, the board sets the budgets and sets the levies, and this is the summary of those 9 budgeted funds that you'll be setting. Really similar information. You have the general fund is the largest. It represents the largest of the budgeted funds, the largest of the levies. The transportation piece, again, 93% of that budget is locally levied. The bulk of it going to pay our contractor for to and from transportation, along with staffing, primarily building staffing, which we're adjusting going forward. We in the high school in particular, we're capturing adult or administrative assistant principals with the transportation levy at 10%. Before we had the principal at 20%, they're at 10%. So 10% of their salaries picked up by the transportation fund, really a reflection of how much investment of time is in transportation by those administrators. Tuition, we like the elementary side, that's going up $450,000 in the high school to capture the excess special ed costs. Retirement fund is a similar calculation there. It's a countywide levy. Adult education on the high school side, this one is a bigger budget, bigger levy. The levy on the high school side for adult ed, the budget is more involved, and it's more involved because it involves adult basic education services, short-term workforce training programs, parent and family literacy that's more elementary, community education, personal enrichment programs, testing, and other community services. So the budget that's adopted involves about half of the budget, probably a little more, in fees, the other half in permissive levy to support staff salaries and building costs, utilities, and now, as we talked about earlier in this year, it's making improvements to the space. I don't think, if you recall, the plan was over 2 years to improve the asphalt parking, there's sump pumps, there's drainage issues. So there's quite a bit of an investment by the program in that building that's going to take place. And plus, we've kept that levy pretty static for a number of years, really going back to the COVID period of time when we were trying to stay flat. So this year, there's a boost there. The boost also involves the Advanced Opportunity Levy that supports that program, those services. Then the tech fund, that's $750 is the voter-approved levy, and the budget here again supports some staff, mostly equipment replacement and software. The flex fund on the high school side, there isn't advanced opportunity on the high school side for flex, but there is advanced opportunity, there isn't transformational learning on the high school side, but there is advanced opportunity aid from the state, so that's why there is a budget there. And that funding will continue. There's just no local permissive levy. Debt service, like the elementary, the levy amount is going down, but it supports about a $5 million bond payment for the 2 bond issues that we have. And then the building reserve doesn't have the safety levy, but it does have the voted maintenance and equipment levy of $700,000, plus that portion of the major maintenance piece, which is $281,000, and the state kicks in $176 for those projects that Burley identified. And I think on the high school side, there were some water projects, some lead projects on the high school side, along with the HVAC and roofing projects. So that's the high school budgets and levy amounts. Again, like the elementary, online, these budget reports provide a lot of detail that really goes over and maybe finer detail than what I just talked to. And then if we jump ahead, you can see on the high school side, last year, our levy increase was 1.3 million. Total levy amount, 21.5 million. This year, there's a levy decrease of 35,000. It's not huge. And then if you scroll down, I don't have it in front of me, but then right there, it's 21.4 million. So you can see the reduction in overall levy. And primary reductions there are in the general fund and the debt service and the building reserve. And here the state's kicking in more for that permissive levy, plus we're reappropriating funds. So our levy is going down there, and it's going up, as we talked about, primarily the adult ed and the tuition fund. So there you see a reduction in estimated taxes, $100,000 home. Part of that reduction is tied to a little bigger increase in tax value, but also to this $36,000 reduction. So if we slide through, the high school side did have a tweak that I didn't mention. So the part of the permissive, or part of the request of the board is that we deposit those TIF remittance funds into the general fund rather than the building reserve. We couldn't do what we wanted to do with that deposit. We couldn't put it in reserves, in the building reserve. So instead, we're asking the board to support putting those into the general fund reserves. Our general fund reserves are small. In the elementary, they're 4.15 with the deposit of the 1.4 million, or 1.2, almost 1.3 million of TIF funds, that those reserves will go up to 6.97% in the elementary. And then on the high school, the reserves were at again, 4.2, and they go up to 5.67. And within the agenda, I did talk about the TIF remittance and the use of general fund reserves. When we talked last week, I talked about acts of God and increases in enrollment, but that isn't the only place that we can use them. So I've listed out judgment for damages issued by a court, enactment of legislation, settlement of taxes or delinquent taxes, And then broadly, any unforeseen need that cannot be postponed without dire consequences affecting the safety of staff or students or the educational functions of the district. So general fund reserves have a broader potential for use, not just acts of God and just enrollment increases. So wanted to point that out since we talked about it. And then we're asking for the reserve, or those TIF funds to be deposited in the general fund reserves. Just take a look at my notes, make sure I got covered everything. Yeah, maybe could we just, oh, sorry, so the general fund, we weren't quite at max, but we are now, and we are now because we could use a portion of the TIF remittance, 71,000, as in support of the over-base levy. So we voted 403,000, and up top you'll see we added 71,000 for the TIF remittance. So that gets us to max budget, which is great. And the additional funds, I plugged a portion that's more on the charter schools, so that gets us the full 80% there. And then there's a balance of about 19,000 on the high school side, down near the bottom. And if we jump ahead, I think the only thing, or actually we'll probably have to jump back to that revenue piece that we talked about on the elementary, but not the high school. It's page 16. There you go. So the bottom piece, you can see the taxable value at the bottom in the high school district did go up 740. And then you can again see the general fund support locally has gone down by 218,000, and then the bigger boost from guaranteed tax base aid from the state. Levies down in the general fund. And then Tyler, if you don't mind jumping ahead to the last two slides, are the graphs I want to say that we didn't touch on. And so the A and B versus general fund budgets, very much tracking on the high school side with growth, really since that 2020, 2021 enrollment counts. And then the next slide is the levies compared to the increase in budgets, and it just sort of looks like what the elementary looked like 10 years ago. And the levy amount in yellow or gold, that far amount at 474, what we identified up above is that 71,000 of that is non-voted. It's from the TIF remittance, so that will not be part of the over base approved levy next year. The green shaded area is when we increased to max budget without a vote because we reduced other budgeted funds, adult ed, transportation. So that's when we were able to still grow without voted levies during COVID. And that's it. Those are the items I wanted to go over for the budget adoptions.
Any trustee questions? Trustee Hayes?
So do we know how much less taxpayers will be paying than what we proposed?
Yeah, so we have estimates, and if you look on this sheet, this is the high school side. I got to get my number.
Is it the 925 for elementary and the negative 37 cents?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, there you go. So 925 is the estimated $100,000 increase,
Right.
and then going down 37 cents. That's
Okay,
correct. Yep.
thank you.
You bet.
Any other trustee questions? Trustee Mercer?
On the debt service, so I get that some of the TIF money went to reduce the levy.
Yeah.
So two questions. One, you said other things were appropriated there. I'm curious where that other money came from. And then my other question is, and there's no way to pay off the debt quicker with that. We just have to offset levy, right? We're not allowed to levy and then pay more to pay off quicker. We just,
Yeah, you can, or the board can authorize that, but it's a process, a refunding process. So it's like a refinance. The funds, the way the statute reads, though, is that it reduces levy. So I don't think you could use it in that way. And when I talked about the other resources, and again, if you look at the budget report that's online, the other resources really are the district tax levy and then the reappropriation of fund balance. So it isn't any, sort of other funding source. It's right within the debt service. So last year, when we adopted budgets and ended the year, we had a balance, and so we reappropriated those funds.
Within the same fund?
Within the same fund,
Okay.
yeah.
One other question. The general fund, or the general fund reserve, where does it sit? Does it get interest? Is it, like, where does it live in the world?
It does get interest, and it sits with our other funds, really with the county. And part of this budget report also includes an allocation of interest. So the increase in those reserves will make our rating agency happy. Moody's is happy when you have more reserves. And really, it's a better financial position to be in with more reserves. We just are a little gun shy, not so much in the general fund, but the state about 10 years ago swept reserves. They lowered the reserve limit in the retirement fund, which was a horrible move, but we try and stay within the reserves without accumulating too much reserves.
Vice Chair Walker Andrews?
Yeah, I have a question sort of at the level at which we're voting. So I presume that what we're voting is what's on page 8, which is just the nine areas and what the totals are. But we still have, if need be, the ability to move things around in the way that they're presented on page 12. So, because certified step increases might be different from what you're proposing, but this doesn't preclude that because it's at the much higher level, right?
That's correct, and it's
Okay.
really a good point, and it's even within the motion on page 8, the board voted unanimously in favor. And one year, somebody added this, a trustee did, and we've left it in there, subject to adjustments to line items of the general fund budget, because you're totally right. You're approving the budget, you're approving the levies, but those line items will change, yeah.
Any other trustee questions? Seeing none, so there's 2 motions for elementary and 2 motions for high school. So first up is motion 1 for elementary to approve the adoption of 2024-2025 elementary budgeted funds and amounts to be raised by tax levies as presented. Is there a motion for that? Moved by trustee Witt, second by Vice Chair F. Garris. Any final trustee comments? Any public comment? All trustees in favor for approving that motion, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. Motion 2 is an elementary motion to approve the TIF remittance. Is there a motion? Moved by trustee Witt, second by Vice Chair F. Garris. Any final trustee comments? Any public comments? All elementary trustees in favor, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. Now we're at the high school. There'll be 2 motions. Is there a motion to approve the adoption of the 2024-2025 high school budgeted funds and amounts to be raised by tax levies? Moved by Vice Chair Walker Andrews, second by trustee Wake. Any final comments by trustee? Any public comment? All trustees in favor for approving the recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. Now is the motion 2 for the high school, which is to approve the TIF remittance. Is there a motion? Moved by trustee Wake, second by trustee Witt. Any final trustee comments? Vice Chair F. Garris.
I just want to say before because we're going through these, that the difficulty of this budget this year. I think it's right to just say something that appreciate everybody's work on this. It was a very tough budget to come up with. Appreciate the administration and all the work that all of you did on that. And I'm glad we got to a spot where we can balance the budget and move forward. So thank you all for Pat and Micah and Amy and wherever Vinny is. Thank you. Trevor. Thank you.
All right, any other trustee comments? Any public comment? All trustees in favor for approving the recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. So now we'll move on to the next topic, which is to approve the lease with Child Start Incorporated, DBA Head Start, and this is back to you, Mr. McHugh.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the approval. So this request is to approve a one-year lease with a Child Start, Inc., doing business as Head Start. They lease the Whittier building. They've leased that building since 1987. There's a stretch of time where they are month-to-month tenants without a lease. They have a new executive director. They've invested in the facility since the damage to the building in a significant way. The program is a federally funded program, and it serves based upon the poverty level, and it serves our students, it serves our future students, it serves preschool students and their families. And to that extent, and I bring it up in the background section, references it, it's a unique relationship. It goes back a long time. It's a very unique service they provide. They're very good stewards of the facility. They have federal standards they have to meet, and to meet those, they really protect the building really to the same degree that we do our facilities. So they're asking for a one-year lease, and we're recommending a one-year lease. The lease payment is nominal. It's $1,000 per month. That's in light of the services rendered, but also significantly in light of their investment and anticipated investment in the building.
Any trustee questions? Trustee Mercer.
I feel like the lease has gone up by 1,000%. Is that not true?
It's totally true. Yeah, it's totally true. And it was a $1 a year type of thing. And so when we met with them, there are things that they ask of us. And so it is important, not just for them, but for us to build an account based upon that rental payment that gives us flexibilities too. And really, it's hard when they might have a facility-based need and we're just a flat no. And I think that was a lot of the intent here, because you're right. The type of program they operate, they need to generate so much from donations or below market arrangements, including this lease. So it's a big deal for them. And this monthly payment was very doable from their standpoint. So we felt like it was a beneficial move really on both sides.
Any other trustee questions? Trustee Mercer.
Just one other curiosity question. And then, did they then move back out of Lowell, or?
They were in Cold Springs, so and then they did have a space in Lowell, and the reason they'll move out of there is we need the room back. So, and their numbers have fluctuated a little bit too. So I think they have the space in Whittier, but yeah, they are moving out of Lowell.
Any other trustee questions? Seeing none, this is an elementary motion. Is there a motion by an elementary trustee to approve the recommendation? Moved by trustee Witt, second by trustee Mercer. Any final trustee comments? Seeing none, any public comment? All elementary trustees in favor of approving the recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all elementary trustees present. Next up, we'll move into B, which is personnel negotiations and policy. And first up is to approve a one-year agreement with the Administrator Meet and Confer Employee Group. And this is over to you, Mr. Lebowski.
Thank you. These are our last two groups to get approved. And then, of course, they were all one-year agreements, so we'll turn right around and start negotiating again. Just like the other groups, this is a bit of a recalibration year. So you see the totals. Between the two groups, there was an average increase of 2.4%. And we looked at things like daily rate and job duties.
Any trustee questions? This is a full board motion. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation? Moved by trustee Wake, second by Vice Chair Efgaris. Is there any final trustee comments? Trustee Mercer.
I guess I just have a question. This is consistent with the other, this administrator one is consistent with all other ones across the district?
Yeah, yes.
Any other trustee comments? Any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, all trustees in favor for approving this recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Unanimous to all trustees present. And next up is topic 2, which is to approve the one-year agreement with the Supervisor Meet and Confer Employee Group. And again, Mr. Lebowski.
Yep, same information. It applies to both the groups.
Any trustee questions? This is a full board motion. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation? Moved by trustee Haynes, second by trustee Wake. Any final trustee comments? Any public comments? All trustees in favor for approving the recommendation, please indicate yes by raising your hand. Trustee Wake, are you in favor? Yep, okay. Unanimous to all trustees present. And next up, we'll move on to topic 3, which is the smartphone-free policy timeline. And this is information only, and I'll turn this over to Superintendent Hill.
Thank you. And I'll just draw your attention to page 24 of your packet. This is what an English teacher's timeline looks like compared to an engineer's timeline. It's readable, it's understandable, and it's short. Last board meeting, we had a group of people, some of whom are here tonight, to talk about a smartphone-free ban or policy for the district. Shared lots of great information, anecdotal information, read some testimonials, talked about letters of support, and they've shared all of that information with me, and so I have it. They've done a great job of presenting a case for why we should have a smartphone-free policy. Knowing that these things can sometimes be contentious and have impacts to our schools, how we run, operate, et cetera, we thought it was important that we take a look at it administratively. And so what you see on that timeline is that we had a meeting last week with our district admin team, which consisted of high school principals, middle school principals, a couple elementary principals, and just talked about planning horizons, what was doable, timelines, the things that they wanted to see in a process, and what their roles would be. And so we developed this timeline, and you'll notice that it's completed, but it is, I'm presenting it tonight as information in case there was feedback that the board wanted to give to me specifically as we move forward on this. And what you see is a timeline that basically starts in September and concludes with an implementation plan and full implementation in August of next year. So giving us time to collect our own data, do our own surveys, talk about hosting community shreds, engaging our parents, our community, our family. Certainly the board is going to want to hear and review where people stand on this particular issue. So we wouldn't be looking at a first reading of a policy until December. That's giving us time to draft for internal and legal review. As you know, all of our policies are reviewed by legal counsel. And then we just look at public participation in that, One of the areas that we talked about as an administrative team is how would we work with our schools if we were to develop a policy where we said, full-on smartphone ban, headphones, smartwatches, et cetera. How would we work with our community? How would we educate our parents? How would we communicate to people what this could look like and the benefits of such a policy? So this is the timeline that we put together, and would just stand for questions from trustees.
Any trustee questions? Trustee Mercer?
Filling in for Grace. Question every time. So, several questions. Why is elementary not, so high school, middle school, there's no elementary on the data collection? And then two, would you consider, so there's no board input in this as a board prior to a fully drafted policy being presented to the board for first reading. We have in the past done work sessions where we've kind of talked around things and you've kind of gotten some thoughts and do that. I guess I'm wondering, would you be open to doing that prior to the real drafting of the first policy so that we don't have a real collision perhaps when that policy draft hits?
Yeah, absolutely. We could work a work session in there before the, maybe right after internal and legal review. So we could put it in anywhere in that November timeline.
And then why not the elementaries on the data?
Oh, so elementary is actually included. We'll be doing surveys with parents and things like that, but also keeping in mind we have cell phone policies that currently exist. One of the things that we want to do, and that I've charged our building principals with, is collecting data on incidents, the things that they're seeing, holding their staff accountable to enforcing policy that is currently on the books, and to see, where the rub is and where it lies. So elementary's involved, but they don't perceive it to be as great an issue in an elementary school with kids being distracted by their phones. They're generally put away in their backpacks. And we do have some challenges around smartwatches and other devices that parents might be using to track their kids' whereabouts and things like that.
Vice Chair Avgaris, then Vice Chair Walker Andrews.
Can you briefly just tell us what is the policy right now?
Yeah, the policy right now is essentially, I'm going to do my best to recap it. It's, in the board policy, it says that cell phones are to be used only at the discretion of the teacher within the classroom and for educational purposes. Would be a way to summarize. There are various levels of enforcement. We have caddies, different things, or bins or buckets that staff members might ask students to put them in. So it kind of varies across the board, as you might imagine.
And my question had to do with the fiscal note. I was just sort of wondering what the costs would be, things like those caddies and things of that sort.
So what was proposed by the community group is a product by Yonder. They create an electronic pouch that can be electronically locked, unlocked. And I think the number I saw when I reviewed it was $175,000. Just startup costs. And so that gets you a certain number of pouches. And I think the numbers that they were quoted basically covered high school and middle school and didn't include elementary. But pouches can break or things can happen to them, so there's these ongoing replacement costs. So really want to examine, what that final fiscal note would be. The parent group has stated that they would like to help fundraise in the event that a policy was passed, but I think that's one of the reasons why, looking at a timeline like this, when we would actually see that come to fruition.
Trustee Hayes?
So has there been any research into grants that would cover the cost of these electronic pouches?
I have not researched any grants yet.
Okay. And then my second question is will all parents receive the survey?
Yes, we will send it out through our either Blackboard or Google surveys. So we have a pretty far reach as long as emails are updated in our system.
Okay, thank you.
Any other trustee questions or comments? I have a comment. I think this is a really good step for the district to look at, and I'm thankful that the parents kind of brought this up as well, as a mother of middle schoolers. Because I do see other states, cities around the country taking this on as well. So I'm super excited that we're taking a look at it from internally, because I think that's best for our district is when our admin team takes a look at this, so that, because they're more apprised to get in touch with us on how our policies are shaped in this district. So I'm super excited that you have a readable timeline. So I'm excited for that. So do you have anything else before I go on to public comment?
I just want to clarify, the board is interested in having a work session, information only, on this particular topic prior to it becoming a draft policy.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, last call for comments or questions. Seeing none, any public comments?
Erica Peterman.
Oh, can you turn your mic on, please? The little button with the other side.
Can you hear me now? That doesn't go into my time, does it? Okay. Erica Peterman, ErikaPeterman. I'm sure most of you know that I've been the one spearheading this working group, and it's been parents and teachers. The teachers, I feel, have been the most important to us. I guess I wanted to just respond to a couple of things. One, as we were sitting there, the timeline, it made me gasp almost, because I feel like we have a situation right now where we all know how bad phones are. We all do. There's no question. I've talked to all of you. There's no question that phones are preventing our kids every single day that they have them in school from receiving a quality education. And our kids are entitled to a quality education under our Constitution. And so every day we don't have a policy, and a robust policy, and a simple policy that doesn't put it on the teachers, doesn't put it on the administration, but completely takes phones out of schools and all devices out of schools, is a day that our kids aren't receiving a quality education. I believe that firmly, and every teacher we've met with over the summer believes that too. It's impossible to teach. It's stopping kids from being educated, and it's stopping teachers from being able to educate kids the way they should be educated. In terms of our communities, it's so important that we have a policy that completely removes phones from schools all day. I asked my son yesterday, I said, "Oh, do you see Emily very much at school?" And he goes, "No, I don't see anybody." And I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't see anybody?" He goes, "Nobody sees anybody. Everybody's heads are down because they're looking at their phones." And when you think about our communities in Montana and how they start and how they are fostered, it's because we are looking up at each other and we are engaged with each other. And those phones are preventing kids from engaging with each other. It's preventing our communities from forming. And if we don't do something about it now, not next year, but now, our communities will continue to deteriorate. Our kids won't be learning. We've done all of the research. I understand that people need to do their own, but there is no question at all that electronic devices are preventing our kids from receiving a quality education. And the longer we take to do this, knowing what we know, the more damage we are doing.
Jennifer Boyer.
Did you want her to sign in? Erica?
Hi, Jennifer Boyer, Jenniffer Boyer. Hi, Micah. We grew up in Polson together. Erica has and Morgan have been our fearless leaders in this, and the research they and we have done committed to this. We are open and transparent. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to research grants. We are here to help in any way. We know this is creating more work for you, but like Erica said, this is a crisis. This is a problem that we can control, that we can intervene as parents, as adults. I had a conversation, many conversations with my middle schooler, and he goes to a summer camp, a week-long summer camp every summer, and I asked him when I picked him up this year, I said, what was your favorite thing about camp? And he said, all of us. He had a cabin of 10. He said, all of us said that we didn't have cell phones. And he knows I'm a part of this. In the beginning, he was not psyched about it. He now said to me in an unprovoked conversation in the car, he said, Mom, I want you to get the Yonder pouches. I miss my friends. And it's heartbreaking, right? So when a 13-year-old boy can verbally acknowledge his inability and his friend's inability to put it down and engage, this is a parenting thing. And we can take care of it at home, but teachers are having to take care of it at school, and it's just too much. They can't do it all, and we expect a lot from them. So the policy that we are pushing for, like Erica said, being all-encompassing and no phones during the day, none in lunch, none in the hallways, is born from research. This is enhanced social engagement is what they obtain, improved academic performance, strengthened communities, reduced anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. I just read a statistic today, I'm gonna digress, that teenage self-mutilation and suicide attempts is up 165% in the United States in a year. Huge. Enhanced teaching environment, equal environment for all, equity in enforcement, because it's top down. Simplicity and clarity in the policy is so important, and we have drafted a policy. We know it needs to come from you guys, but again, we're willing to share. Clear consequences are incredibly important. They need to be simple. The office shouldn't have to enforce a bunch. Consistency across classrooms, reducing administrative burden. These are all things that we have been considering. And a big one is prevention of online bullying. Girls are scared to go to the bathroom because
Your time's up, thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Matt Sims.
Good evening. My name is Matt Sims, Mattsims. I come before you as an educator and a parent. I taught high school for 15 years. I'm now managing education after school and summer camp programs, and I have 2 teenage daughters. And they also, having been through discussions, have come to terms with the fact that this is most likely going to be a reality in their world, and they're okay with that. Mostly why I'm sitting here is I feel my perspective as a teacher before smartphones and cell phones, and then through it, I've been through the policing, Snapchat conversations under the table. I've been through collecting every phone in a box at the beginning of the period and letting them have them for a break at lunch. Or during class, I've been through putting a shoe tree on the back of the door and having every kid check their phone into a little pocket with a number on it. I've been through trying educational models and using phones for positive things and educationally. And it was all a huge struggle, and it was a struggle for all of us. And some teachers were the mean teacher who took them away every time, and some teachers were nice and let them have them. And just as Jen and Erica said, none of it helped learning. And really, aside from that time and now being a parent of teens, when that became differently clear to me was this summer, teaching mostly little kids, and I know they're different humans, but they don't have phones yet. And I didn't even realize how nice it was to not have to think about phones as an educator until a couple kids had them. And they'd pull them out, and suddenly every kid would magnetize towards that phone. And it was very easy to tell those kids, like, hey, this isn't really equitable. You know, most of these kids might not have phones, and they don't know how to control themselves, and so they're going to come to yours, which really was meaning you can't control yourself either because you're pulling it out during this educational opportunity. But all of a sudden, I had these feelings that I hadn't had in 5 years where, like, oh, now I'm policing phones. I'm not educating anymore. And I hadn't even noticed how nice it was to just be with kids and teach them and watch them learn and get their attention and hold their attention without having to fight something else that their brains are not yet ready to control. I have a hard time controlling all sorts of uses of my phone. And I'm an adult, and I grew up without them. They can't do that, and I don't blame them for that. We have conversations almost nightly with my children about phone use, and it's really hard. And to try and let them police it in schools for themselves is impossible. As a teacher, trying to do that, I found it impossible. I tried all sorts of ways. My colleagues found it really challenging. It just didn't work. I think having them away during the day is the solution. And it seems like that solution is being born across the country with very quick and simple results. And I think rather than being behind that, we could be right there in the middle of it. Thank you.
Molly Bradford.
Hi, Molly Bradford, Molly Bradford. I am giving public comment as a parent of 2 kids, a 17-year-old who should be a senior this year, and an 11-year-old going into 6th grade. And I'll start by just saying the amount of time I spend negotiating with my 11-year-old is wildly disruptive. And we have had really strict rules at our house for years, and he doesn't have a phone at all. That's just the iPad. And it's locked down with every possible parental control that's out there. Having his dad be in IT means we're like an extra tight family, and they all know how to quickly make their own VPN and then Google a workaround. So if that's when an 11-year-old knows how to figure out going into 6th grade who doesn't even have a phone yet, it's pretty amazing to think about what the high school kids are doing and that we're asking all of our teachers to police that. The other thing that I will bring up is that we have a 17-year-old with mental health care issues. And in the spectrum of mental health, she would probably normally fall in the middle or a little bit high. But she's your typical teenage 17-year-old girl whose issues are exacerbated by every single thing that you read about smartphones in the school. I'm not going to get into the Snapchats that we've had to screenshot and send to the administration that other girls have sent, but the bullying, the loss of self-worth and self-esteem, anxiety, depression, and exacerbation of mental health care issues is out of control. And we have plenty of friends whose kids have never presented with the same issues as our daughter, but now have them as a result of similar experiences. I just want you to think about the science for a minute and consider the first time you hiked a huge peak with friends, or that first time you earned that first kiss, or you baked your first loaf of bread or bagged a deer, and you worked so hard for that win and that dopamine and that joy, and then you shared it with friends afterwards. What happens on cell phones is our kids are fast-fed, quick dopamine on a conveyor belt that makes their highs harder to achieve, their lows lower, and there's none of that community-based collaborative pillow talk that happens after that first kiss or that first peak or that first loaf of bread that you share with your friends or your neighbor. So they need to not be in the classroom all day, and our teachers need to not be policing it Our kids need to be learning and making friends and courting joy and earning their dopamine. Thanks.
Jennifer Oakland.
Hi, it's Jennifer, Jennifer, Oakland, Oakland. And I'm speaking as a parent on behalf of my kids who are age 13 and 11. My 13-year-old is an 8th grader at Washington, and my son is going to be a 6th grader at Washington this year. What really strikes me is hearing the science, reading the science, knowing the concrete data around the impacts that smartphones are having adversely on kids. Our kids are in school for 6 hours a day, 30 hours a week. They're spending more time at school than they really are doing anything else. My kids go to school, they're lucky enough to go to some sports practices, sometimes with school, sometimes outside of school. They come home, they do some homework, and they go to bed. This time at school is critical for them. It's critical for them to be learning. When I talk to my daughter about school and what she did that day, she talks about the disruptions in the classroom. She talks about other students' phones going off, buzzing, bleeping, whatever they're doing on their phones. It's such a distraction. My daughter's one of the only ones in her class, she says, who doesn't have a phone at this point. And it's disrupting her learning. She's not able to effectively get out of school what she needs to get during the day. And that is disheartening for me. I want to be able to trust her education, trust the district, and also entrust these teachers that they're able to do what they want to do. We have some incredible teachers in our school district. I love our teachers. And I've talked to them, and they're complaining about it too. They say, yeah, it's a nightmare. We can't teach what we want to teach during the day because these kids' phones are so disruptive. They're disrupting one another. They're disrupting what the teachers want to teach. It's not working. So this group has done a ton of work in trying to create a strategy for the district to implement. It can be done. And I just urge you to please consider a strategy to help the students get what they need these 30 hours a week that they're in school, socializing, learning, doing what kids need and should be doing in a healthy way. Please enact some sort of policy to make this school the best that it can be. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to give public comment whose name we have not yet called? No further public comment.
All right, thank you all for that. And I will move on to item 7, which is adjournment. It's 7:51. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.